Please, please, show mercy on your king.
Mercy. This is mercy.
Today's episode is sponsored by Metatailor. Welcome to Virtual Production Insider. I'm your host, David Stapp, and today we are breaking down my entry into the Chasm's Call 3D Challenge by the Punisher YouTube channel. This challenge provided a template where we had to have a character looking over some kind of large space, some kind of large chasm. So I didn't waste any time, and I had to come up with an idea, and I had to come up with it quick. So I grabbed a few reference images from different movies to help nail down the style I was going for, and then I hopped over to the Fab Marketplace, and I'm going to show you the exact assets I pulled into my project to create this scene. The first asset I pulled in was the modular medieval environment by FreshCan, and this really served as the background of our scene. Next up, for the weather effects, I did use ultra dynamic sky for the overcast look in the scene, but then I also combined that with Easy Rain by William Fauché. And I know that ultra dynamic sky does offer weather effects like rain, but I really wanted to try out Easy Rain, and I was super happy with the results I got with it. It is an incredible plugin, very easy to use, and I couldn't recommend it more. Next up, I knew I was going to need some animations for the background characters. I didn't want to have to do mocap for everything. I really wanted to limit the mocap I was recording for the main characters. So I found a really great sword animation set on Fab that really gave me all the motions I needed to have these background characters fighting in the castle. Now I needed to figure out my main characters, and I knew I wanted to have this kind of ranger slash assassin looking character fighting the king. He's kind of made it to the final boss, right? So I found this amazing assassin outfit, but it did need to be fitted to my metahuman, and we're going to get to that in just a second. The other asset I found was this medieval Russian Duke armor, and this was an amazing find, especially because it was already targeted to a metahuman body. So I didn't have to do much to this asset other than making the clothing look wet and add some physics to the cape. And one of the final assets I brought in that was a huge time saver when it came to actually animating and cleaning up the mocap was the Metahuman Animation Tool by Locadrome. If you haven't used this tool yet, please go to Fab right now and download this. It is insane how useful it is. You can easily switch between the face control rig and the body control rig of your metahuman, and then you can start making your adjustments. So that's a good overview of all the assets I brought in, and the first thing I did was open up the template map that came with the project, and I started to block out the action of my characters in the foreground. We have our two characters fighting on this castle bridge, and that's going to be overlooking this massive courtyard where there's a big battle happening. And to build out that foreground bridge, I actually used assets from Big, Medium, Small. They have an incredible medieval pack that has so many different assets that are so useful in creating a scene like this. One of those assets was a stone castle bridge, which I brought in to be the basis of this foreground area. This is where they're fighting. The other really handy assets it came with were these fallen knight meshes. These are basically knights who have fallen in battle. They're already in a dead pose on the ground, and I was able to put them on the bridge as if the assassin had already killed a few of the king's men before he started fighting the king. So I actually just took those fallen knight meshes, brought them into the foliage editor, and I was able to use the foliage tool and just spawn a bunch of these bodies all over the place very quickly to show that the battle had been going on for some time. So I definitely want to give a special shout out to Big, Medium, Small. These were incredible assets to work with, and I actually do have a special episode planned using their SWAT pack, which is amazing, by the way. So if you want to see that pack in action, make sure you're subscribed. Now for the foreground bridge, I did bring in a stone Megascan material, and I actually updated it to use displacement. And then all I had to do was enable nanite on that mesh, and now I've got an extra layer of detail to really add to the realism and the imperfections. And speaking of surfaces, the really great thing about Easy Rain is it comes with some material functions so that you can add rain droplets and puddles on any surface very quickly. Now for the background, I wanted this battle to feel like chaos, right? And what better way to show that than by adding fire elements? And you already know where I'm getting those elements from. I'm getting my VDB fire assets from Pixel Lab. They've sponsored us in the past, and they are just some of the best fire assets out there. They are so easy to work with, and I actually have a video that shows how to import and set up VDBs inside of Unreal Engine 5. So go check that out, because this is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get realistic looking fire in Unreal Engine. Now to amplify amplify the fire in the scene and to really add to the lighting emitted from that fire, I used two different techniques. The first technique was using a cylinder with a really bright emissive material that was right behind our characters, kind of behind the foreground. And I didn't want to use something like a rect light or a really long point light just because those were feeling too harsh. The nice thing we can do by adding an emissive material to a cylinder is that we can go into the settings of the cylinder, and there's a couple boxes that we can check here. The first is basically we want to hide that cylinder. We don't want it to be visible to us. You can check actor hidden in game. This is going to make it to where you don't see it when it's being rendered. The other box you need to check is affect indirect lighting when hidden. This tells Unreal to still render the light that is emitted from that emissive source, but just don't make the source visible. So it will hide the cylinder, but we're still getting that boost to our indirect lighting on the bridge. The other technique I used was to achieve the embers on the left side of the bridge as if there was a fire right below where the characters are fighting. Now you can use Niagara, we could use a VDB, but I'll tell you what, it's hard to beat the real thing. And I actually found a stock footage clip of real embers on a black background. And so I thought, hey, let's try to put that onto a plane, set that material to additive so it gets rid of that black background, and let's just see how it looks. And I'll tell you what, holy cow, this looks so good to me. And the reason for this is because those embers have real motion blur in them. True motion blur captured with a real camera. And that's something that you miss out on a lot when it comes to like the Niagara particle system. It's a hard thing to fake. Next up, we needed to animate our main characters. And just like I did for my short film Banished, I used Move AI. So I went out in my backyard, I acted out the parts of the assassin and the king, and then I imported those into Unreal Engine and retargeted those animations to my metahumans. And for the opening fight scene that you saw at the beginning of this episode, that's actually just an animation from Mixamo. This animation has two characters fighting, one of them gets stabbed, and then as that character starts to fall, I cut to a custom animation I recorded with Move AI, so I did end up combining Mixamo with Move AI. Now, like I mentioned before, I needed to get the assassin's clothes fitted to my metahuman, so that's why I used today's sponsor, Metatailor. Metatailor is a dedicated software for creating custom clothing for 3D characters, and it's been perfect in my metahuman pipeline. You can easily adjust blend shapes, thickness control, and even fit things like gloves to your characters, which is one of their newest features. And this came in super handy because I literally had some fingerless gloves that I needed to apply to my metahuman. And one of the features I was excited to try in Metatailor with this project was their physics tab, where you can literally apply physics to different articles of clothing. And in this case, I applied physics to the capes of the characters. So as they're fighting, we have realistic moving cloth. And we do have a dedicated episode here on the channel that walks you through applying clothing to a metahuman using Metatailor. So if you want to check out Metatailor for yourself, there's actually a link in the description below where you can get your first month for only $10. So now we've got clothing applied to our characters, we've got mocap imported, cleaned up, and applied to those characters, and now we're ready to render everything out. And one of our most recent episodes actually dove into rendering with Movie Render Queue inside of Unreal Engine. But I ran into a really interesting issue when it came to anti-aliasing and cloth physics. In my typical render preset, I use one spatial sample and 24 temporal samples. However, if you plan to use cloth physics, having a higher value than 1 in the temporal sample count is going to make your cloth physics look insane. And you can see it right here in this render. The cape just does not look correct. You have to set temporal sample count to 1 if you want your cloth physics to look correct out of Movie Render Queue. Then I basically just swapped the numbers and upped the samples in the spatial count. And I did get a little message that said it needed to be an odd number, so I just bumped it down 1. So I ended up using 23 spatial samples and 1 temporal sample, and this gave me proper cloth physics for the capes on my main characters. And now that all the rendering is done, it's time for those beautiful finishing touches to bring everything together. I, of course, added the opening fight that you saw in the beginning of the episode. I got my good friend Garrett to provide some facial animation for the characters because, like I've talked about in the past, I've got a big beard, and MetaHuman Animator does not like that because it needs to have clear line of things like your jawline, your cheeks, to get good facial mocap. So basically, I recorded the body mocap of the characters, Garrett recorded the face mocap of the characters, and I combined all of that in Sequencer. And there you go, guys. That is my entry for the Chasm's Call 3D Render Challenge. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, you definitely need to be entering these kinds of challenges if you're a 3D artist, because this is the best way to learn and to grow. And I do want to leave you with a little teaser. I can't go into too much detail, but we are ramping up to launch our very own render challenge right here on this channel. And it's going to be very similar to the Punisher render challenges or the Kitbash 3D render challenges, but with a virtual virtual production spin. And I am so excited about it, guys. We're already starting to gather some amazing judges and prizes for this. So again, I can't go into too much detail just yet. This is something we're looking to do here in the next few months, but be sure to stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe so that you can learn more about that when we announce that. And if you haven't heard already, I'm currently working on a new course called Unreal Engine Film School, where I dive deep into literally these kinds of cinematics that you saw in this video, where I take you through my full process. You know, these videos are kind of a more general overview. This course is going to be kind of a uncut tutorial where I walk you through every step of how I create my cinematics, but also how I apply real world film techniques to my cinematics. Everything from camera movement to lighting to post-process effects, you know, everything you need to bump up the quality of your animations and make them feel more cinematic. So if you want to learn more, there is a wait list in the description below where you can sign up to be notified once we announce things like pricing and the release date for that course. And as always, be sure to join our Discord server. This is a place where you can come and join other people in the virtual production community. So thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Be sure to leave a like, throw me a comment down below if you have any questions about anything. And as always, I'm David Stapp with Virtual Production Insider, and we'll see you guys next time.